all the indications are, looks like a terrorist attack. Either something went on in the cockpit because it had all these bizarre diversions. It was sweeping 90 degrees one way, 90 degrees the other way. It descended down to 15,000 feet almost instantly. Something went on in the cockpit, or there could have been an explosion on the plane, because we had a fisherman, I think it was, in the area where this went down, who said he saw basically a giant fireball in the sky. We don't know exactly what happened, but every single terror expert has now come out and basically said it's almost certainly terrorism. But Donald Trump came out and said it was almost certainly terrorism, again echoing every single expert that's made a comment on this, but he's bad. This is out of Infowars.com. Mika Brzezinski, Robert Gates take Donald Trump to task over terror tweet. And it's not only MSNBC, it's the New York Times who said, the first American presidential candidate to comment on the Egypt air crash, again, how dare he, was Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton has said nothing about it, but the New York Times is now attacking Trump, saying Mr. Trump, without citing any evidence, suggested that the crash was caused by terrorism. That's right. He dared to suggest that planes just don't fall apart in midair. That the Airbus involved in this crash, which has one of the best safety records going, again, no indication of any problem, no communication from the plane that there was a technical problem. He asserted that, in all likelihood, it looks like terrorism, and he's a terrible person for doing so. Of course, he sympathized with the victims, whereas Hillary Clinton remained completely silent. And as of right now, as I speak, she's still tweeting about the Second Amendment and gun grabbing. She's got nothing whatsoever to say about the downing of this airline, which killed 66 people. We'll be back on the Alex Jones Show Live with more news after the break. Stay right there. We are back on the Alex Jones Show Live. We've got Gavin McInnes coming up in around 5 minutes' time, continuing with this Egypt air flight news. The Mirror reports Egypt's air flight MS-804 crash may be the final nail in the coffin for Egypt's tourism industry. Of course, that's been melting down for the past 5 years. Turns out that allowing Islamists to turn your country into a crap hole isn't that good for tourism. Imagine my shock. Of course, the British Foreign Office got warning that ISIS was planning beach attacks, as we saw in Tunisia last summer. They put out a warning to British tourists, not about the ISIS beach attacks, but about going to North Carolina and being discriminated against because of their bathroom law. That's how much on the ball the British Foreign Office is when it comes to foreign threats to British citizens. So now there's been this apparent claim of responsibility from ISIS for the downing of this Egypt airliner. That hasn't been confirmed. It's just a one-sentence report, so we're staying on top of that. But again, Donald Trump, basically in the first hour after this happened, came out and put out a tweet saying that this is tragic. It looks like terrorism. When will we get tough, smart, and vigilant? Of course, echoing every single terrorism and aviation expert who said that planes with outstanding safety records don't just break apart in midair, and that all indications are that this is an act of terrorism. But Donald Trump is bad for doing that. He's being attacked by MSNBC. He's being attacked by the New York Times simply for pointing out the blindingly obvious. So, of course, they've got the debris now. It will take time to ascertain exactly what happened, but we're going to stay on top of that story. Of course, yesterday it came out that the Pope had made some more bizarre comments, so bizarre, in fact, that people couldn't believe them. I can't tell you how many messages I received basically asserting the Pope never said that. Well, he did say it, and I've got the comment right here. This was in a French Catholic newspaper, and I've got a video coming out about this after the show ends here in about an hour's time. This is what the Pope said. This is what he actually said. You can go and read it, link through from the InfoWars story. Quote, I don't think that there is a fear of Islam as such, but of ISIS and its war of conquest, which is partly drawn from Islam. It's true that the idea of conquest is inherent in the soul of Islam. However, it's also possible to interpret the objective in Matthew's gospel, where Jesus sends his disciples to all nations in terms of the same idea of conquest. So the Pope is basically equating ISIS's war of conquest in the Middle East to Jesus in the Bible sending out his disciples. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I must have missed the Bible chapter where Jesus' disciples behead people, force them into sex slavery, and make them pay a tax on pain of death if they refuse to convert. That wasn't in my Bible. I must have missed that chapter. So he did say this. He equated ISIS to the Bible, to Jesus, and it's quite frankly shocking, but it's in line with his previous statements. He also said he dreaded hearing about the Christian roots of Europe because to him, they take on colonialist overtones. So he's basically sounding like Barack Obama, bringing up the Christian Crusades when the problem of militant, violent Islam is pointed out. Of course, if it wasn't for the Crusades, which were a defensive move against Muslim invaders, then Italian women would now be wearing hijabs. But again, the Pope has come out with these comments. He did actually make them, link through to the article. But it goes even further down the rabbit hole. He basically agreed with radical Islamist preachers in saying that Europe has a massive demographic problem, which is true, we're not having enough children. But the Pope's solution to that is to bring in millions more Muslim migrants and have them interbreed with Europeans. Now, that's interesting because we featured a video by this guy called Sheikh Ayed. It's been in several of my videos now where he says precisely the same thing. He says, Europe's dying, their fertility is declining. We need to surge into Europe to, quote, conquer Europe by interbreeding with European women. This is a form of jihad, and it's being called for by top Islamist preachers. And now the Pope is saying the same thing. He made these comments. They're on the record. You can go and read the entire interview for yourself. And again, I've got a video coming out about this after we get to the end of the show here, basically taking on the Pope for his rampant hypocrisy, for the fact that he's completely abandoned Christians and Christianity. He's constantly undermining Christianity with these kind of comments. He's constantly lecturing us about the evils of capitalism because, you know, South American socialism is working out really good right now in Venezuela, isn't it? So just the insanity of this Pope and what comes out of his mouth continues to get more and more absurd, and we got a video coming out about that at the end of the show, but we've got our guest waiting now. And this is fortunate because I wouldn't appear on his show, and that's going to happen in the near future. He, of course, is Gavin McInnes, an English-born Canadian writer, actor, comedian, serial entrepreneur, and co-founder of Vice Media. He's the host of the Gavin McInnes Show on Compound Media, and of course, he's a contributor for the Rebel Media and a frequent guest on national television. He's got a far longer bio than that, but for the interest of time, that's going to do it for now. Gavin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Good to have you on. Now, we've got Salon.com yet again, and let's start off with this. Giving a platform to their resident pedophile, Todd Nickerson. We've got on the flip side, you know, Portland College lecturing young students about how they owe black people $20 trillion in reparations for slavery. Why is the leftist media lecturing white people about how they should be ashamed to be white while telling us to be proud of pedophiles just because they haven't molested children yet?
Because their agenda here is sabotage. It started out maybe as creative destruction. Let's tear it down and then rebuild society in our own image. But now it's just, you know what, screw rebuilding. Let's just blow it up. They have no plan here. They just want to wreck our culture. And everything that you should be ashamed of, you should be proud of. And everything you should be proud of, you should be ashamed of. And I realized today, I was talking about this with Mike Cernovich, we just need to put society in a Word doc and go edit, find, replace, look up shame and pride, and just replace all. Because everything that's white male, even we had a guy here, Nick Solares in New York. He was doing restaurant reviews. He just lost his job because he may have been associating with skinheads 30 years ago when he was 18. Conversely, we have this Todd Nickerson saying, hey, don't call me a child molester. I'm only a pedophile who babysits a 5-year-old.
I mean, if you had kids, would you let him anywhere near them? And the other thing about it is, did you see the video that they used in this latest article of him? They had him describing his fantasies about this 5-year-old girl, about how he had to relieve himself in the bathroom. And the background B-roll to this footage, like a 5-year-old girl dancing and twirling around. I mean, that to me was as sick as what he was actually saying, right?
I am so glad you brought that up, because I was obsessed with that too. The way they frame it, they've clearly stated their agenda, which is, we understand his sexuality. There you go. Oh my God, it makes me want to vomit just to look at. He calls her precocious and independent, and we show this video of her dancing around like they're trying to convey how he would be horny for her. It's infuriating, and it really shows how far we've come. And it also shows, by the way, we started out on relatively reasonable grounds here. We started out with gays are not monsters, lesbians are not monsters. I agree. And then we started going into gay marriage, and we said, well, I don't know if Christians should have to be part of these ceremonies. And it just keeps, as the Phil Robertson from Duck Dynasty said, it keeps morphing out from there. And now we have to accept that this guy wants to prey on our daughters, but is resisting. We're supposed to give him a Purple Heart because he's resisted preying on toddlers? No.
I mean, it's an illustration, again, of how low the left sets the bar for humanity. And that video is absolutely chilling. They're basically romanticizing the lust towards a 5-year-old girl. They're not talking about it in sober terms, even if you think that's permissible in the first place. It's like this dreamy footage of a 5-year-old girl twirling around while he's talking about masturbating over her in a toilet. And they treat this as a serious social justice cause. And he's allowed to have those. He should be respectful, and he should prosper now in society because he's achieved the goal of not molesting a child. And like you said, people are being fired for having conservative political opinions at the same time. I know somebody in a top university, just found out yesterday, who was hauled into a meeting and basically threatened with being fired because he retweeted me, and he retweeted a London Telegraph article about Caitlyn Jenner. Those opinions are not permissible in today's society, yet it's permissible to lust after a 5-year-old girl.
Yeah, I saw you tweeted that, and I wasn't remotely surprised. I mean, Britain is the place where Jack Buckby of Liberty GB now was kicked out of university as a student because he dared object to a professor who sympathized with the people who decapitated Lee Rigby. He said, I don't like you glorifying these Islamic terrorists, and he was asked to leave campus. We just had a guy here, I'm not into sports, but he's an ex-pitcher who put up a Facebook meme about creeps being in your bathroom, trannies. And he's off of ESPN now for good. It really is an upside-down world. And you start looking at the data and you go, wait a minute, I'm noticing a pattern here. Everything that is depraved and wrong and sick is good, and everything that is good we should be ashamed of. White males? We built society. We separated church and state. We didn't end slavery. We didn't begin slavery. We ended it. How about
we'll be back with Gavin McInnes after the break. We are back on the Alex Jones Show, this Thursday edition. And before we go back to our guest, I want to remind you to go to InfoWarsStore.com. Of course, next month we've got Bilderberg coming up. Again, we're sending 3 of our reporters, myself included, over to Germany. The flights, the hotels, the equipment, the food, everything that goes with it doesn't come free. Somebody has to pay for that. And of course, with your great support, we've been able to dispatch reporters all over America, different hotspots in the world even, to cover these breaking stories, to cover these big events, to challenge the mainstream media right there on the ground. And your support is much appreciated, which is why we insist, we plead with you to go to InfoWarsStore.com and check out the products. We've got 20% off Survival Shield. We've got Anthroplex special deals on that. We've got the water filters. And of course, free shipping on every order over $50. Again, that fuels our tank. That allows us to challenge the mainstream media narrative with your support at InfoWarsStore.com. Going back to Gavin McInnes. Gavin, I just want to get onto the interview you did with Jesse Hughes here in a moment. But first, he kind of had to recant. He had to back away from some of the claims he made in the aftermath of the Paris